I'm Brad King, and this is Stories in Steel.
In the baddest part of badass town. I'm the baddest ass of the badasses in the baddest part of badass town.
Well, hi there. I didn't see you come in. We just set this aside here. We can get on with today's episode.
Stories in Steel is filmed before a live studio audience.
In your house, surrounded by awesome brands.
Stuff.
Yes,
yeah.
Stuff. You're kind of one of the premier, and I'm going to say that truthfully. You're one of the premier automotive artists out there. But sadly, a lot of people don't know who you are.
Which is probably for the best.
Which is... So what, you became an automotive artist. Why did you become an automotive artist and not do architecture or not do wildlife? What made you want to be an illustration? So it's kind of a loaded question.
That's a really loaded question, yeah. Well, that's why I took up cars as like subject matter.
Yes.
Love cars. Been around cars my entire life. Born into it, really. Had two parents who were absolutely bizarro car crazy. And I mean, when I say that, I mean my dad was into cars, my mom was really into cars. I had no chance. That was like a melding of two genetic samples coming together that were like just probably like high test.
So that was your world. That's
all I knew. I was a parts guy. My dad was a parts manager at a GM dealership.
Okay.
That's what he always did. So having that going on, I was just around cars, around parts. I'd go in on weekends. We'd do inventories, things like that. So I got a real good feel for what parts were what. And having kind of a really overactive mind, I wanted to know what every part was. So as you hold a part, reading the label and getting a feel for it. And all of that somehow just jumbled in my brain and never left. So it became kind of a weird thing later on when I do do junkyard crawls.
Okay.
I just had an idea of what I was looking for anytime. Just kind of knew things. Sort of became like a human Hollander interchange manual.
Yeah. So the artwork was obviously part of the deal from the beginning. You probably got in trouble a lot as a kid by doodling in class. No, you never got caught, or you just got good grades.
Dude, I sucked. I'm like a perfect illustration of like a great opportunity for education gone completely awry. I spent more time, I think my notebooks were more full of car drawings than they were anything else. It'd be hard pressed to tell now because, I think I'm more known for other anatomical drawings.
So you were destined. That was your...
I think that I thought I would parlay that somehow into being an automotive engineer or designer, kind of a Raymond Loewy or, any one of those guys who was like a studio stylist.
All right.
But then I discovered I really like to argue with people. So I thought for the longest time I'd become a lawyer. I thought that was the greatest thing. I thought after watching TV and movies, I thought you got paid to like argue with people. And to me, this is the greatest thing ever. You got to debate and argue. So I was going to follow that for a long time. And I just kept coming back to cars. There was no other way around it.
It's just the way it was.
That's just where I was at.
So did you have formal training in this, in what you do?
As far as drawing cars, no. I was kind of pushed by my high school art teacher to go into fine art.
Okay.
And I saw no opportunity in that. Nothing against him. He's a great guy. I just thought I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't have the looks back in the 80s and 90s to become a fine artist, because all these were like, it was like the age of like the really pretty people. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to make it on that. I can try to get by in a personality. So I thought, well, what have I got? I really enjoyed science. I enjoyed the physics of things. I thought I'll become an engineer. So I started going to school for engineering. So there's a big change. You go from being a lawyer. So at one point, maybe I could have represented the people who were injured by a poor design. And I went into, I was taking a lot of, you take drafting courses and you pick up a drawing class here and there just because it's a really, for me, it was a very simple way to get a credit. It was a breezy class. And in one of those classes, I had an instructor say, why aren't you in fine art? So I took a wander one day through the fine art department at our school. And I got to tell you, a lot more girls in the fine art department than there were from the engineering side. And I kind of fell in love with it. And I thought, well, okay, you get to draw naked people. And apparently the day that I walked through that area where they're doing figure drawing, they had the hot models. And apparently that contract ended. So I started to follow that. And about halfway through, I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? I'm back to, do I want to teach? Do I really want to paint and put on a black turtleneck and hang out in galleries all night long? And I thought, okay, I'll turn this into a career in animation. So I started to pursue that. And I tell you, starting a family kind of early. Should we get into that?
Well, you started a family early, so obviously something changed. Your plans changed.
My
from
plans
what your
changed.
initial deal was.
I had met a girl.
Okay.
Hit it off. She had 2 kids, really young. 2 and 3. And I decided, well, I can do anything else. How hard can it be to raise 2 kids? And I learned really early. Okay, so that ended the career in animation. And sent me right back to kind of what I knew, which was working in a parts department. So took work doing that. And at night, one day, I just decided, well, hey, I wonder if I could, to put some artwork out there. The internet was just kind of starting up, as far as like being more mainstream. Started to put some things online and people enjoyed it. So one day it hit me. I thought, well, if I can just draw a little bit more, I can supplement my income, things like that. And this is making a long story really short, but started to do that. And fortunately, the world of Myspace came to fruition. And I was into a glittery page that played music when you got to it. There was no glitter. A lot of music, though. And it landed on my page, and there was my art. And it gave me an outlet to not only draw, but to kind of go out there and just blog about stupid stuff. Nobody else wanted to hear me babble on and on, so I thought, this is great. People will read it. And for some odd reason, a lot of people enjoyed it.
So you had a pretty good following on MySpace?
I had a huge following at one point. And I realized, oh my God, I've got all these people following me. Maybe they'll buy a t-shirt. And started to sell t-shirts, prints of my artwork. That went great for a long time. And then had my son Daniel. And I realized pretty quick that I needed things like health insurance. So my ex-wife was working at the time. I was doing this stuff, plus taking on a day job. So I was trying to do all this at the same time. And then, as you know, in 2008, the economy really took a dump. And all the good fame and internet fortune went kind of by the wayside. Did everything from moonlighting for a greeting card company. I didn't get to write the cards. I think they knew better. I had to go in and do things like, prep them for print, which is... And you haven't lived till you've seen some of the photos people send in for greeting cards. Did that for a few months. And just as the economy picked back up, started drawing more and more cars. And that's right about the time I got involved with like Troy from Rad Rides by Troy. Right. And the rest was history.
You did a few cars with him.
Did a couple, yeah. Did a couple really cool things. I got to work on George's Torino. Right. Which was a great deal that kind of got dropped right in my lap at the perfect time. Did the nailed Buick and got to work with with another great artist, Ryan Root, and put together the Model A for Mariani. Okay. Which is a great little car. Totally different, way out of my league usually. I'm a little different style wise. It was a really kind of a different take on a traditional car.
Now, drawing cars, just, sketching cars when you first started doing it, to actually designing something that would be a usable product, something you could actually drive. I would imagine the little engineering background would help you understand a little bit of if it's going to work or not.
Oh, big time. And I don't want to, not to go off on a tangent, but like, as far as having the engineering background, that was great. I think I was better served having worked in the collision industry and in the parts industry. Really got a feel for how things go together. And if you spend any time building a car, you just get to know how things fit, how things work. And doing collision work was really big as far as understanding structure. So if you combine formal training with some hands-on work, when it came time to design something, my brain was working, I think, a little different than the average artist was. Where one guy's going, well, this is going to look really cool, if I put this, 56 Chevy grill into the Chevette. My brain was going, well, if we got to make that fit into the Chevette, I've got to cut this much out of it. And now we're at X billable hours, this much in materials. And I'm thinking way out of the box. So when I'd come to the table, I don't think half the builders knew what to do with me. Because I'd argue small points. It was like, we're going to put it on this. I'm like, it's never going to fit. And I'd say, well, why not? And I'd pull out all kinds of diagrams and I'd have my measurements figured out. So it went deeper than just a pretty picture. It became this whole design thing. And I didn't know how to sell that at first. I just thought, it's just an added bonus for what I do. You get this value. You get a guy who comes up with a great anatomical joke somewhere along the way and maybe draws a cool car for you. But apparently it was worth something to somebody.
And so you've carried that over. You've designed a lot of interiors, and I really like what you've done. A lot of it you've taken what obviously what the dealers, but not what the manufacturers have done, and just changed, whether you jazz things up and move lines around, just made it more appealing to the eye. But was that something you wanted to do besides design cars? Was interior design, or what brought that on?
That kind of came secondary. I never really gave that a thought. Like as a kid, I'd build model cars and you kit bash some interiors together. But I think looking back on it, I was fortunate I got to spend a lot of time in newer cars, especially after my dad had gotten, he'd get dealer cars from work, which was great. You get a company car. So we'd have a new car coming into the driveway every few weeks. My dad had a way of ordering the right cars that would get sold. So he'd order these really tricked out cars and they'd be gone in a couple of weeks. So you're always in these cars and kind of critiquing them. You're like, well, this is kind of neat. This works like this. These panels clip. And yeah, there's probably somebody else who picked up one of the cars that we had with like, how come it rattles a little bit? It's because some idiot kid was sitting in the back seat pulling apart the panel to see what kind of clips held it together. And, you just get to look at little things. And I think it gave me a really unique kind of a unique way to look at scale and look at the space itself. And it got weird. And again, spending a lot of time in a wrecking yard on the weekends, you get to know parts. So you start to look at things and in your head, that a seat is this wide. The cushion has this much of a bolster to it. And you start to pick these things up and all of a sudden it's like, the car needs an interior. I'm like, I know how to do this. How hard can this be? And you learn it's pretty hard. But it was fun to just do things where, in my head, I can figure out a sense of scale and space. It's really easy for me. It was great because I could say, okay, how tall is the driver? And I know from my anatomy drawing classes, if you said, this guy's 6'4", okay, well, great. How's he built? He's built like a linebacker. Great. I know that his torso is going to be so large. I know that his legs are going to be just so long. And I could kind of piece this together. So when I draw the car, I throw in little measurements here and there. And I always it was one of my favorite things to get was an email that says, dude, you nailed it. We can build it right off of this and fit this guy in this car perfectly. And I used to love it when they go, how do you do it? And I'd never let him in. I was like, just lucky guess. Meanwhile, I've got 15 pages of notes where I'm trying to figure this out. And if anybody came in, they're like, why do you need to know how long this guy's leg is? What's his inseam, One of the weird questions I ask. I've got 50 questions I ask a client. What's your inseam?
What's your inseam? What's your shoe size?
How else are you going to know what size footprint gas pedal to put in the car? Be awesome.
So you grew up in the East Coast, where it's
Yeah.
cold and yucky and winters suck, and I'll pass. Oh.
Yeah.
And now you're out here in the Phoenix area, where it's nice and toasty all the time. It's nice winters.
As you've discovered this week.
Oh yeah. Summer can be a little warm. How'd you end up out here? This is a long way from home.
Yeah, and it's funny. I now consider this home. Born and raised in Buffalo, New York. When you think like Rust Belt, you think Detroit, Buffalo. I grew up there, and in my 20s, I remember to this day, early May, had a snowfall. And I remember sitting there looking at this at work, staring out the back door of the parts room. I said, I'm gone before it snows like this again next year. I'm out before the first snowflakes fall. And kind of sight unseen, didn't say sight unseen. I said I had a couple Polaroids of it. I had rented a place in the East Bay and decided I was going to go to school out in San Francisco. I'd never been there in my life. All I knew was from pictures, and I knew there was a really great car community out there. So packed up my stuff, literally loaded everything I had into 2 cars, put one on a trailer, and took off across the country. And I did that in August of that year. So there I was, early 20s, driving across the country.
It was an adventure for a guy in his early 20s.
And it was fun because I remember I made it a point to a couple of friends of mine. This is before like really cell phones. I had no cell phone. Should have bought one. That would have been awesome. Would have helped too. But there I was driving across the country, and I remember going, I'm never going to have to see snow again. This is so awesome. I get to Evanston, Wyoming. I pull in for the night. It's cold. It's bitter cold that night. I pull in this little hotel, park the car, go inside, sleep. I wake up, there's a foot of snow. And I was cursing my life. I was like, oh my God. But within like a day, I went from another foot of snow on top of everything, going across the Sierras and dropping down into the East Bay and going, oh my God. I'm like, it's 95 degrees. Life couldn't have been any better. I mean, that first winter out there, seeing, happy holidays, a banner like this at a dealership strung between 2 palm trees. I was at home, man. I was like, this is where I want to be. Christmas morning, it was like 70 degrees. I'm outside on the patio wearing shorts and a t-shirt, drinking a cup of coffee, calling home, going, what's it like? We had a nice storm, and if we're lucky, it's only going to snow 5 feet. I'm like, oh yeah, have fun with that.
I may put pants on today.
Which would have been a first period. I won a lot of pantsless days out there. It's a trippy time, kids. One day at work, of all things, my boss says, you ever been to Phoenix? I said, nope, never crossed my mind. And he says, well, you should check it out sometime. It's really affordable and it's nice. It's kind of your place. And I thought, Phoenix, whatever. So I had vacation time coming up. Took a week, came down to Phoenix, and one night I had gone out to a Best Buy, bought a typewriter, and in the hotel room, I typed up my resume, went out, and a day later had a job. Went back up there, gave my notice, and packed up all my stuff and drove down the coast.
Thanks. So what is the coolest car that you've been involved in? I mean, that's kind of a crazy question because you've been involved in a lot of really amazing builds. What would be your favorite?
That's hard to say. I mean, that's like asking me who my favorite kid is.
Okay, who's your favorite? No way.
I'd like to do that.
No, let's not.
That's horrible. No. Favorite? It's going to sound corny because it's probably the most well-known. George's Torino.
Okay.
I love that car. I love everything about that car. It's such a great project.
It's a very unique car. I will say it. I watched that, saw pictures of it going together, and it's before I met you. And I remember a friend of mine, Alex, and myself, we were at the Grand National Roadster Show, and it was in bare metal. And I was like, holy crap! There was so much going on, and there was nothing hidden. When you show a car in bare metal, that's pretty amazing. There's no hiding anything.
And that car was more about the people, though. That was such a cool group of people to work with on that thing. And everybody on that team was so behind that car. It was just bizarre. And I think I like that car so much. Because I got to work on some cool stuff beforehand. Little stuff, but never anything that was like the Disneyland of cars like that.
Right.
Where if you could imagine it, they were going to put it together. It didn't matter what it was or how weird it was. And I remember going, man, I hate those Torinos. That's a harsh word for that. I do not like 68 and 69 Torino. I just don't like them. They just always seem kind of out of proportion. The wheel openings were just too small. And when Troy had offered me the opportunity to just kind of go nuts on it, he said, draw it like you'd build it. And I thought, okay. He says, the only restriction being it has to have like a vintage NASCAR feel to it. And keep in mind, it's got to be cool. So right off the bat, I was hindered because I can't draw anything cool. So I took a lot of time and just figured I took everything I didn't like about that car design and tried to fix it. And when he said NASCAR, I'm thinking, oh, the fenders have got to be blown out. The quarter panels have got to be pushed out. And I want to give it kind of a Coke bottle look. And by the time I got done, I thought, there's no way they're going to draw this. There's no way they're going to build this car. The drawing's just too far out there. And I'd sent it off. I heard nothing. This is scary because usually...
How long? What are we talking time period wise?
A couple days went by.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm at the point where I'm going, oh no, what do I do? I'm thinking, maybe he didn't get it. Well, I'll give him the rest of the day. I had to go out and of all things, I was shopping for rock to landscape my house, which is the great part about living in Phoenix. It's like most people are like, I gotta go get sod. I'm like, I'm gonna get some rock. And I'm out shopping for stone. And I got home and there was a message on my machine. And let's just say Troy was very excited about the whole concept. He was digging it. And it was great because he had the right people to do it. So when you get a guy like Levi, who obviously went on to do really big and bad things too. And that kid went in and formed almost all the sheet metal on that car. And that thing is so crazy and so far above and beyond what I ever imagined it would be. And I didn't get to see the car. The first time I saw the car was 2013. It was complete. I mean, complete, painted and everything. I'd seen it in pictures. Heck, I mean, I was on the phone late one night when Lawrence was milling the grill on the thing. Which is a cool story unto itself, but...
Tell the story.
Oh, yeah, well, needless to say, the grill didn't entirely fit inside their mill that they had at the time. So it had to be milled half, put back in, and milled the other half of the way. And that guy, I tell you, is way too talented for his own good. And we just made it a point where he says, if I've got to be here all night, you should be here with me.
So you were on the phone the whole time? So I was
on the phone for quite a while. Yeah, we were just talking every now and then, checking in all the time. And I'm like, where were we at? And he's like, we're getting halfway there. And I remember thinking to myself, in my head, I'm back to the business thing. I'm figuring billable hours and time on this thing. And we're going, holy, like we just created like a $15,000 grill. And the great part is I think that makes the car though. It's got the Talladega look to it without having to have that super extended front end. Magazines
aren't as prevalent as they used to be. Obviously, the internet has kind of taken over. But as far as articles about cars you've worked on, if you had a lot of, we'll ask magazine covers or articles on stuff you've done. Have you had a lot of stuff covered?
Stuff I've done has been great, man. I've had stuff, the weirdest thing and coolest thing for me, I love it when they feature a car in bare metal. That's the coolest thing. When you see a car that's not even finished yet, that's always an exciting thing because you're like, oh, this car's going to be huge. People appreciate it now, you know. And I've had a couple that have been featured in bare metal on the cover.
So, okay, we need to go back to we'll go back to the first car that you actually had a major, not just like little design parts, but like a major involvement in, and you saw it from your drawing to the finished product. What was it like for you when you saw even the Torino, when all of a sudden you're standing there going, I'm looking at something I designed. I took a factory design and I had my way with it. I owned it. It's mine. You know, what was that like?
That's a hard thing to describe, man. It's like looking at your kid for the first time. You know? I mean, you know, you hold your kid for the first time, you're like, I made this. Or like when you buy your first house and you're standing outside and you're like, I own a building. It's the weirdest feeling. And for me, it was the coolest thing. I was like, I had a hand in this. And then there's the letdown. Well, I don't know. Should we talk about that? That's
sure. Absolutely. There's definitely some disappointments in this, but it's not the disappointment that should have been. It's just the way it turned out.
Right. So So you're watching a movie about two friends and they work in a factory and they're doing a really good job, so they get featured on the cover of a magazine at one point. And the shorter of the two friends just happens to have his face completely blocked off by the UPC in the corner. Instead of being positive about it and going, I can't believe it, I made the cover, for me it was like, uh-oh. And you get this weird feeling, it's like, hey, maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed it, maybe somewhere in here, you know, because there's all the promises usually when a car goes together. It's, oh yeah, you're part of the team, it's gonna be great, we're gonna be featured in this magazine. Man, we're gonna give you all the credit, and you knock the price down on all your design work, thinking, okay, this is gonna give me coverage in front of people who normally wouldn't see this. This is gonna be a great advertising opportunity, and your name's left out. Or worse, it comes up and you see, all of the design work was handled in-house, and you're like, who did they hire? Like, I don't work for these guys, I'm not on their payroll. Or even worse, like, let's go worse cubed, is when you see, oh yeah, I came up with this whole idea after I bonked my head on the plow handle. And you're like, really? That's a horrible feeling, man. And I think it's the worst because that's your calling card. And if nobody knows you did it, you're always kind of back to square one. And for me, it was like, you could be 5 years deep into it. And every time you have to explain to someone, well, I worked on this car, I did this, you're right back to that first day when you're out there going, hi, I'm Brian, I can draw cars, here's my card. You know, your hand's all shaky. And so I was looking at it like, you know, it's weird because it puts you right back there every time. And I mean, I remember being like 10 years, 12 years into this and having somebody go, you worked on that car? I didn't know you worked on that car. Or they see drawings of it online, like, oh, you drew pictures of that car. Like, yeah, before it existed. It's kind of a letdown, you know?
But then you've had other stuff that recently that has mentioned you, and the builder was gracious enough to go, we actually had help with outside. It wasn't in-house. It was a guy that we knew that could handle this, and they gave you kudos for it.
And those are the cool guys. And it seems to be at the upper echelon. You can get that. Those are the guys who seem, and it's weird. I don't know if it's like a thing where there's a sudden awakening at a point in their career where somebody says, hey, it isn't about building an ego. It's about showing that I can work with a team. And suddenly they come out and they're really gracious. And, you know, among them, I mean, Troy's great like that. Troy's just a good guy. Troy, always warm, always nice. I mean, you get a guy, like a younger kid. Should we mention names here?
Sure.
Like Zach from Z-Rods. Zach Ingram, I think that kid, correct me if I'm wrong here, and we'll come back and revisit this in 5 years. If he's not a household name in 5 years, I'll take this back. I'll eat something in the house.
We'll find something.
I'll do something. I'll repaint that by using my tongue. Who knows? A guy like that, though, where he understood it was the value of the team. And there were things that we both brought to the table. And we'd sit around, we'd bench race for hours. So what do you think of this? Oh, I like that idea. What do you think of that? Oh, I like this idea. And suddenly you're just meshing and you're meeting right in the middle. And it gets to be this weird thing where you're like, did we just become best friends? And you're like skipping down this path to like glory with this car. And it's awesome. Right. And at some point, the owner rears his head and knocks you completely off the path. And you're picking up your little basket of apples. It's just a weird thing. But yeah, there's a lot of guys who leave it out. And it's a tough gig. It's hard when you see everybody else mentioned. And it's like literally everybody that they had contact with for that like 2-year build period. It's like, and big thanks to Marcy down at the Circle K, who provided me with a donut one morning, gave me the correct change. And you're like, oh, she got mentioned. I'm like, oh.
And this actually kind of breaks my heart because I can relate to this and part of my history. But there was numerous cars that I honestly had no idea that you had any part of. And it was just recently we were talking about it. It's like, I had no idea, because there again, no names, no mention, because they want to keep it in house, and I understand why they want to keep it in house, because they want to promote their shop as being their shop.
That's the name of the game.
But the problem is, like with any other business, and which is just doing what we do, we are the artists, and they want to keep that credit to themselves because they don't want to share. They like what you do. They don't want to share you with anybody. They don't want to have their competition come along and go, we're going to have him do something. So I understand that part, but it's just kind of heartbreaking at the same time, because again, I'd seen stuff that you had done and had no idea that you had any part of it.
That's always funny to me, And it was weird, like when we talk about that, and I'd say something like, man, I worked on that car. You're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I worked on that car. You pull out the pictures, and it's a fun gig, but and it's hard with it. Almost seems like people don't believe you at some point. Again, back to not back to keep bringing up somebody's name, but there was a builder. I had met him while I was working another gig. And during a break, I came back and said, hey, here's my card. Here's what I do. I wanted to work with this guy. I was just like, I saw the potential in this guy. And he says, wow, I always wanted to meet this other builder. And I said, I know him. And the look on his face was like, you designed this. You know this guy, whatever. A couple minutes later, I see this builder walking by. I'm like, dude. And all of a sudden, the guy's face lights up. He's like, okay, maybe you're not so full of crap. And the conversation goes back, and then you feel kind of vindicated. But a week later, you open up the magazine and you're like, oh, great. The cobbler that made this guy's baby shoes when he was born, he got mentioned. I'm like,
not me.
Not me. And it's a tough gig. But I think the big thing is it's not, I don't know. I think I'm over that. I don't know if you grow a thick skin, maybe you just resign yourself to deal with it. But I'm to the point now in my career where I really, and it's hard to say this, I don't think I care anymore. I enjoy coming up with a cool design, and if they mention it, great. If they don't, whatever. It is what it is.
Right.
And if that's where it's got to be. So I think it's maybe it's a maturity thing. Maybe it's some kind of severe psychological disorder. I don't know.
You're just totally jaded. Just don't care anymore. As long as your check clears, I just don't care.
I suffer from some kind of dystopic kind of weird, inability to feel anymore. That'd be me.
Now, something I want to talk about, and it may be a weird one, and if you don't want to, I understand. But you have MS.
Yeah.
And I know that's affected how you create artwork. What you're able to do from what you used to do. But the average person would have no idea. They still see Brian Stupski artwork, and it looks just like it always has. They don't see how you've had to change how you do things.
Well, it's just because I keep reposting the same crap.
No, but I mean, you've done everything you possibly can. Obviously, you're doing something to keep your style the same. You can't. You're not doing the drawing tablet thing anymore. Your pen and pencil. You'll still sketch things up with a pencil, but you're still creating it to make it look like it always did. What have you had to do to adapt to that situation?
That was kind of a weird thing. That was back to that whole universe dropping something in your lap thing. Years ago, I had come to the conclusion that if I was going to get myself back to school, because I want to go back to school and finish up the animation thing. That was like my number one goal. That kind of fell short. And there's a great story behind that too for another time. But I want to get back into it. And to do this, I needed to learn digital stuff. Needed to learn it. And learning it on my own just wasn't going to happen. And the internet was still really young. The few things that were out there were horrible. And it usually, and nothing against the people that are putting out these tutorials, but when it's tutorials, and then I'm going to slowly work on it, and they're mumbling, and you're like, oh my God, what button did you push? So I signed up and I took some classes. And I found at the time I hated Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. I was like, I will never use this program for anything. I swore up and down. I was like, this is horrible. What a horrendous piece of software. And one day I was laying in bed and I went, oh my God, the pen tool. That's the answer to everything. Now I can make a drawing. If I start off with my sketch and I scan it in and I'm working over the top of it, it doesn't matter what size it is. I can blow this thing up and it's awesome. So I spent months just working with the pen tool. And I may have hurt myself in that respect because now I refuse to use brushes, presets, anything. Still use the pen tool. Right. But I had to find a way to make my work in the computer look just like my stuff on paper. And trying to mimic markers and ink with vector, paths. Well, you've done t-shirt work, it's never the same. So I took everything I learned from my painting classes. This is where everything kind of came together for me. But if I layer the heck out of stuff, I do things as like an underpainting, and I start building on top of it, I can have something that looks exactly like what I used to do. And it worked out great for me. So when the time came and I started to lose the use of my hands, which was really a weird thing for me, I had like no dexterity. It was like putting your hands in a freezer, and pulling them out and going, well, here, Brian, play Operation, and which we could do. It'd be an entertaining hour. But so you have like no tactile feeling, and we were going for tests, and they do these nerve conduction things where they hook up an electrode up here, one down your fingertips, and they measure how much electricity it makes. And we're looking at the chart when I first got it back, because you get somebody in there and they're checking the machine. And when you're hooked up to this and they're calling other people in to look at the machine, you're going, it's going to be a long day. And they come back, they bring in another machine, they test it, and they go, you have no reading. There's nothing. And they're like, how do you make it? It just becomes a muscle memory thing. It's like what you used to do. If you just keep doing it somehow, you can keep moving forward. So I started to just do this nonstop with the digital stuff. And the problem was it was taking me so long to make this stuff, I totally missed the boat on making like tutorials for this. So I don't know, it's probably way too late to do it. But that was one of the things I wanted to do, was on my plan. So I have all these tutorials and help somebody else who can't.
To show people that have the same issue you do how to
go about it.
Keep doing it. Okay.
And at some point I'll get to that. It'll be way too late at that point, because well, we no longer use tutorials, we just tap into your brain. And it's be somebody with weird X-rated pictures.
And pizza or something.
What? I had a great recipe for something like chicken. And, but it was weird. It's like, I had to find a way to keep earning a living. And I couldn't stop. So I made the move over to digital. But like you said, though, I still like the part of, when it comes time to put an idea on paper, like being able to sit down with a pencil and sketch. And my sketches are far crappier than they used to be. But I can still make out what they are. I still enjoy that part. So it's not like I'm finishing up and somebody, that's a great dachshund. I'm like, no, it's
no, but you still, I've seen your stuff, so you can still get the point. I can look at it and go, okay, I can see what you're trying to get here. I mean, I can see what you're trying to accomplish. So, for the average person, all they need to do is just see something.
Just forms and ideas.
Here it is. Like, here's the idea, and then you show them the finished product. They go, well, it looks just like the drawing did, because you followed that same basic style.
Every bit is sloppy. So, they look at the finished drawing and they go, that's a great dachshund. No, it's a dachshund. Like, no, same thing.
Okay, I want to talk about something that it's absolutely not automotive related, but it's pretty freaking cool. So, you were almost on the TV show Jeopardy. Yeah. This is cool. I mean, this is cool.
Bizarre.
So tell the story here. How did that even come about?
I love trivia. I love learning, period. I have this thing in my brain. I want to learn something all the time. So instead of don't get me wrong, I read a lot of car magazines. Like as a kid, I always read something. If something interested me, I wanted to learn about it. So I really got my brain into this. And I was, maybe 10 or 11. And I had first sat down and had never watched Jeopardy. And here I was like, this is so awesome. This is a great show. I'm like, this is weird. They're going to ask all these questions. It's like all this weird arcane knowledge. I'm like, that's what I'm great at. You give me arcane knowledge or movie quotes, my brain's happy. And I remember going, one day I'm going to be on Jeopardy. And I guess it's a little different now. I mean, with the internet, you can go on, you can take a test and everything like that. But you had to go and you had to take it's sent away. You get this test. You pass the preliminary test. And then they send you this book, and you have to go through this book and learn all this other stuff and go for another test. And then you go down and you do this preliminary interview. They've got to like you. So apparently my personality is far better than this. So they're like, well, we can make do with whatever that is. Let's put them in shadow. Okay. So I always imagined I'd be behind the microphone or some other guy's head would be in the way. But you go through all this, and I had made it through to the final. I was in that final selection pool, and it was great. And I had to make a decision. Did I want to go down there and be on Jeopardy or show up for work? And it's the one time in my life I look back on with total regret that I was a responsible guy. I, in all honesty, should have gone, after this, I'll find another job, and gone down. I think I really would have whooped some severe tail, because I remember watching the show, figuring out what the lead time was on episodes, and going, this is the pool I would have been in. Here's where I was at, and I'm watching these shows every night, and I'm going, I couldn't go wrong. Everything that came up, I was like, I knew it. I was on it, and I remember kicking myself. I was like, I would have won this round. I'd have been in the next one. I'd have been in the next one. I'd have been, and I was going, I keep looking back like that was my one missed opportunity. And I always wondered if like the universe somehow just kind of always whispers in my ear. It's like, psst, that could have been you. And, you know, it would have been neat to be, you know, this guy who won Jeopardy. It would have taken a totally different turn. I don't think we'd be sitting here now. Well,
no, you'd have won, but you'd have been the guy in the paper bag. They wouldn't have known who you were when you won. So you'd have got no credit for that too.
Alex would have been up there going, well, I won this round. And we did this in-house.
That's right.
And it was just so funny, though. I'd probably be sitting here with Barbara Walters discussing, so, Brian, what happened during that bender? And I couldn't feel my hands.
There was an automotive thing. It was this last year, and it was called the Triple Crown, and cool. And it was a car you designed. You had your hands on that car. So, how was it? How'd that feel? Was that you had some pretty heavy hitters you were going up against? It wasn't like that was easy.
Awesome.
It wasn't an easy one.
And that was the first year for the Street Machine. It was the first Street Machine, really, and car from the muscle car era, ever featured in Street Rodder magazine. And much less it was on the cover. You know, it was cool because that car was on the cover with two other really beautiful cars built by guys who were just legends in the industry. Zach Ingram of Z-Rods built the car. He said to me, I got this client who wants to build a 71 Cuda. I thought, I'm all over this. I'm a Mopar guy.
Yeah, it's getting you all over it.
I mean, I was born and raised in a GM house, but I wound up being the black sheep Mopar guy. My parents used to lock my room when company would come over. Like, you just stay in here with your little Mopar pictures, you freak. And your top banana colors, you goofy bastard. And I saw this project as an opportunity to really do something different with a car. Bam, Triple Crown of Riding. Awesome. It was the greatest thing I ever got in the mail. I loved it that I had gotten a package from the publisher, and there was a stack of Street Rodder magazines with that car, the feature in it and everything, and a nice letter that says, congratulations on being selected as part of the Triple Crown of Rodding. And I sat there, and it came at the perfect time of my life. I was going through a horrible divorce. My life had completely fallen apart. I was like, where am I going to go with this? And I get this in the mail, and I'm like, oh, life is so good. So I'm on the phone for like an hour with Zach. We're just going back and forth with two girls. This is so great. We won this, and this is going good. And then you hang up, and I'm like, life is good. And nothing mattered after that. I was like, this is so awesome. We kind of did this. And seeing that car replicated on top of the trophy for, the Triple Crown was so cool to see. I was just like, that's badass. Because like 11-year-old me, when I go to and I build model cars and show them, you win a trophy. I want to do one that looks like the car I made on top of it. And there I am, I'm in my 40s.
All right.
I'm going, car I made is on top of a trophy. Awesome.
So you grew up in a car family. That was whether you wanted to or not, that's what you did. What have you had? What have been some of the cars you've had? I know you've had some.
Should we start with should we go all the way through? I mean, the cool stuff that I had. The first car I ever restored, I was 14. So I'm going through the Penny Saver, and the one week I find an ad, it's a 69 Chevelle. I go, kind of like those. It's kind of cool. The price is right. I call the guy, and the way he describes it on the phone, I'm going, it's a basket case. I'm like, the front end's wrecked, the left rear quarter's wrecked. Going, but it's an Oklahoma car. How bad can this be? So I keep putting it off. And the car stays there, and it goes down like $100. I'm going, now we're getting someplace. So finally, I talk my parents into this. I'm like, can we drive up to the North Towns and look at this car? Dad's like, well, how much money you got? And I think I had $500. I'm looking at this car, and your average person's mom would have walked in there and gone, oh, no, just no. You're not bringing that hunk of junk to the house. My mom's looking at, crawling underneath going, floors are good, rockers are solid. Yeah, this is pushed in, but it didn't bust the inner wheelhouse away from the quarter. This can all be pulled out. We're figuring this out like a family, And whittle the guy down. He's not going to go any lower than $675. And I'm losing my mind. My mom was going, well, you have it towed. Okay, so I'm not going to have you have it towed. You bring it here. I'll give you $675. My mom steps up to the plate, hands me the $175. I'm like, so I'm indentured.
Oh yeah,
I'm totally indentured. But I've got this car, and I'm like, and what starts is, I'm just going to get it halfway together. And my dad was like, we'll get it down to the body shop at work. The guys there will help you out. We're going to teach you how to weld. We're going to pull the quarter panel out. We're going to do this stuff. Meanwhile, Brian picks up a little side job. I go from mowing every lawn in the neighborhood, scraping cars in the morning, shoveling snow all winter. I mean, I was a hustler. That's all I did before I could get a real job. And one day I get, hey, why don't you come down to my buddy's shop and sweep the floors at night? Okay. I'm going to ride my bike 6.5 miles one way, do the stuff, ride it back, Well, it turns out I go to work at this engine shop. And unbeknownst to me, it's a local guy. It's just a local dude who has drag racing cars, builds some cool stuff. They build really awesome motors. I'm like, engines, sorry. Back to that whole power seat engine thing. And get this job, and it turns out I'm sweeping floors for one of the premier engine builders in the world. So here I am at Adi's Automotive, sweeping the floors, getting to know the guys, and everybody there was really cool. I was just this young kid. I think they liked me because I'd ride my bike up there, and I hustled, man. It was like, you needed something done, I'd do it. Need parts picked up. Yeah, I was not a driver. We should leave this off. I was driving, no license, no nothing.
Perfect. So you get the parts. See, you need the parts, you get the parts.
I did what I had to do. And so when time came, it was like, well, we got to get an engine together for that car. So I start building this 327 for this car. That's the block I had. So when you got the premier engine builder in the world helping you build this motor, this is the coolest time I ever had. Now we're going to back up a step though. Meanwhile, I get some money in my hand. Now I've got a license. I get a little bit of money. A distress sale comes up. My ears are perked up. 55 Chevy, $500. How do you go wrong? Here's how you go wrong. You buy a 55 Chevy for $500. It was a 55 two-door hardtop. Great car, right? I mean, a sedan would have been cooler as a street machine, but hey, hardtop, how are you going to beat that? What a piece of garbage. And it was in primer. Picked this car up, and I remember going, man, the doors fit better than they usually do on this car. Normally look at a 55, and the doors kind of bowed out, just the way they fit. This car fit in kind of flush, and I'm not putting two and two together. This car had 3 sets of rocker panels on it. The factory ones and 2 extra sets welded on top, because why not? Floors are a complete mess. Weak. I mean, there's sections of supports missing. All kinds of stuff's gone. This car's such a wreck. Barely holds itself together. I mean, you could hear this thing. You go around a corner, this whole thing would like shift. You see, like pushing the roof back where it belongs. And what do you do when you're a kid like that? Well, you take the 265 that's in it out, and you build a bitchin' little 283 for it. I'm working this place, and we're basically building this parts room mishmash 283 that's going to be a monster. So we punch the sucker, and it's 292 cubes, and we're almost at that ragged limit. I think you go to like 301, 302 cubes out of one of these before you run into real problems. And we stuff this huge cam in this thing. Forged rods. It's got this Victor intake on the thing with a huge Holly 750. Cool as all get out. I've got, Fuelie heads. I've got these white hooker headers that came from God knows where, but fit in the car. We build this sucker, and this thing is a terror. I had a buddy of mine gives me a Muncie for it. He goes, here's the transmission, you need this. I go out, I buy a Pontiac rear for the thing, because it's what I could afford. Well, we've got that out. Yeah, we decided, well, we're going to swap the leafs to the inboard so we can run big fat tires in the back. Because I've got a hand on these nice little Pro Tracks, right? We said this car's a screaming terror. But looking back, total death trap. I mean, total death trap. This car, horrible brakes. I mean, manual steering, manual brakes. Still had the one pot, master cylinder on it. And I used to drive this thing like a bat out of hell. It doesn't hurt. You have 488s in the back. And the thing ran it was so great light to light, but every other way sucked. And one day I decided I was going to drive that to school. I was going to school in Buffalo. So I'm driving from, the suburbs into the city. And I got onto the thruway and I just made the most horrific mistake of my entire life. I had no gas gauge in the thing. So I'm just trying to count miles. No functional odometer. I'm just kind of going by like mile markers. I'm going, okay, maybe I've got enough gas to make it. Maybe I got enough gas. So I get halfway there, I stop and fill it up. I go, wow, I really miscalculated this. I don't have enough gas. I spent every penny I had to get to school. Now I'm at school, I go, I gotta come home. I'm rounding up people that I can drive home.
You can get money.
I'm like the Pied Piper of I'm like getting people like, do you value your life? No? You're gonna wanna ride in my car. I learned that like the back seat had a weight limit because it started to bone the side. That's how I got home.
But you got it home.
I got home, I borrowed gas money. Like, we're going to have to make 2 stops on the way home. Both at the gas station.
Didn't take that to school anymore.
That's the end of that. It's the best feeling about driving down the thruway that morning, hitting 55 miles an hour. And the tax all ran over. Thank you.
This is what we were doing. This is what we were doing.
Should we tell my story?